right, everyone, back with Santiago. Santiago, I think this is our last weekly roundup, or second to last weekly roundup.
I know. I feel like this has been going on for much longer, but incredibly excited to round up the year and into next year. I think these have been very, very fun in a short period of time.
Yeah, exactly. I think I know we've come a very long way in a short period of time, you and me, Santiago. I'm feeling like we've got a good little thing brewing here.
I think so. Hopefully people like it. If they don't like it, they could always be very vocal on Twitter, and we're listening. We're paying attention. So, if you don't like anything, just raise your hand. And
Though I guess if no one liked it, that means no one would be listening, which means we would actually never know about it. So we could be sitting in like 2025 and just no one's listening to this damn thing. But anyways,
that's a good point.
I still enjoy chatting.
Yeah, we can just rip on it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys, we got 4 narratives that we're talking about this week. We're gonna try to do a better job of kind of batching the episode into basically narratives, then news, then the tweets. First section, narratives, 4 narratives. Number 1, Jack Dorsey really fell off the rocker this week, talking through kind of his comments on Twitter, going after A16Z, the VCs, the entire Web3 space. The second thing is an interesting thing that's popping up in a lot of conversations, at least for me. I'm not sure if Santiago's seeing this, but DAOs are starting to win deals. And by win deals, I mean they are out competing VCs to get on cap tables. Really interesting trend that's just starting. The third thing is permission DeFi. Is it the next enterprise blockchain, or is it going to be a really, really big trend in 2022? We'll be talking about permission DeFi. And then the fourth thing, crypto social media. It kind of triggers me because 2017 was, I feel like this was such a buzzwordy thing and it completely fell off a map and everyone's like, crypto social media makes absolutely no sense. I disagree with that. We'll get into some of those thoughts, and there are some big things happening on that front. Then we'll get into the news, then into the tweets. Then I have a movie or a TV show recommendation, which I'm excited about. So
we always need a TV and movie recommendation, especially this time of year. So
yeah, exactly. I've completely lost myself in this one show. Anyways, first things first, Jack Dorsey tweets out, "You don't own Web3. The VCs and the LPs do. It will never escape their incentives. It's ultimately a centralized entity with a different label. Know what you're getting into." All right, that was December 20th, 11 p.m., kind of late at night. Maybe he had a couple drinks at that point. Second tweet, "The VCs are the problem, not the people." Third tweet, "Jack, we invest in software eating the world," coming after A16Z with a screenshot of Andreessen. What do you make of this? What's going on with Jack right now?
I don't know. I think I tweeted about this, which is, I think people need to understand the influence that they have. And, we're talking about it. So Jack has a lot of influence, the same way that Musk has influence. It's always been perplexing to me how someone like Jack doesn't understand and just stops at Bitcoin. And it's just been difficult to understand from my perspective, which is why would you be critical of Ethereum or other stuff? It's sort of like there's a double standard here, right? Because I think Jack sold one of his first tweets as an NFT, which is using Ethereum, for like 2.9 or 2.6 million. So it's when someone is throwing stones at something else, you have to understand, well, wait a minute, you can't live in this dualism of criticizing something you're using. And so I don't understand it. Candidly, I think that it is, first of all, not true in the sense that Web3 is not owned by VCs. My thinking is, if he were to start Twitter today, he could have credibly started it without raising much, without going directly to VCs. First of all, there's nothing wrong with VCs. So this is anti-VC sentiment, which is, how is a VC any different than a community member? In fact, I would argue some VCs are no different. So we should just remove this classification of what is a VC and what is not a VC. I mean, ultimately, everyone is a community member. And so that is always, first and foremost, if you're not a community member, you're going to be called on that bullshit. And so Jack, I think, is just very out of tune in how these communities are operated. And look, there's always ownership by individuals and investors, and they provide value, some more than others. But I think it's very off base to say that Web3 is owned by a particular investor. So that's just blatantly wrong. And so I think it needs to be called out as such.
Yeah, I think it's important. Balaji had this interesting response to him. It's important to remember that Twitter, of all of the social media platforms out there, Twitter was the most free social media platform, the least dedicated to kind of one, or like run by one political party in the States, right? It felt very free, and it even started almost more like a protocol and more like a protocol than like a centralized platform, right? Like they were really good about allowing third-party devs to build on the platform, and then slowly but surely, that all got wiped away, right? They started ripping third-party developers' accounts. They started to choke off the access to the social media, to the social network through, if you remember, like Meerkat when they were competing with Periscope. They started to just basically kill the API. And then what's happened is they've started purging different accounts.
Yeah.
That's an interesting kind of framework, is that Twitter started as this protocol. Jack obviously understands what's going on.
Look, I mean, I think the other thing I want to add is I tweeted about this, and it says, alluding to Jack specifically, it says, success doesn't make you an expert overnight. So, stop pontificating and opining on fields you know little about. I mean, it's clear that Jack hasn't done his research, because anyone that has actually tried and delved deep into Web3 would understand that, wouldn't make those statements. And so, I always like to remind people, you have to be, you have to be skeptical of these like experts. They might have been very successful in a different state of the world. They might have been successful like in their own respective Web2 or other fields. But there's no shortage of people that come into this space and come into crypto and have this knee-jerk reaction and feel like they can opine and pontificate, when the reality is all you need to do is, whenever you're entering a new field, an arena, just take the time to learn it, take the time to understand it and talk to people. And it's clear to me that, given his remarks, it's clear to me that it's unclear to me that he's spent meaningful amount of time educating himself about Web3. So
yeah, I mean, this is what my co-founder Mike, this is what Mike always talks about, which is, he's like, you look at all these, crypto has this way of drawing out people who are experts in one thing, and they start opining on something else. I guess it's not really just crypto, it's really anything, right? There's a lot of people who make a ton of money or become very powerful or just in general have a lot of success in one specific industry, and they start opining on other things, right?
Absolutely.
And you might be a really, really, really amazing developer or tech builder, but as soon as you start talking about macro, right, which is kind of happening here, you just get so fixated, you don't really understand actually what's going on. In the same way that someone like a macro thinker, some of the best macro thinkers are typically 5 years, 10 years late to tech trends because they're macro thinkers, right? They're not tech investors.
Yeah. I mean, this is what makes me incredibly bullish about crypto, which is we go back to this idea that we're so early. And the fact that, to me, when I see all kinds of experts, from Taleb to Peter Schiff to Elon, Jack, and sort of quote unquote, even Ray Dalio for a long time, critical of Bitcoin, of crypto, and so many other people that have been very successful in a different, like Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger. I mean, these are one of the more celebrated, successful people by a lot of standards in their respective fields. But the fact that like crypto has like, everyone feels like this knee-jerk reaction to have an opinion on crypto. And in my life, I've just learned it's better to delay judgment on things if you can. I think the luxury of being successful and having a certain amount of wealth, if you will, is that you can take the time. Just take time. And I think Jeff Bezos was one that said that. Like he said, money has allowed me to take time and defer judgment. And I think I really believe in that sort of philosophy, which is, why would you? Because it's clear that a lot of these people are pontificating and criticizing crypto and being skeptical. It's fine to be skeptical. We should always be skeptical. The problem is, it is very clear when someone is being skeptical and hasn't tried this technology, because we've come a long way from 2017. We've come a long way in a year. And so, Web3 is it is more decentralized than Web2. And I think increasingly Twitter and a lot of these platforms will wake up to this idea that if they're just not going to be competitive against Web2. And so, whether he wants to believe it or accept it, it's just a matter of time.
I think Jack hating on the VCs is not the story here. It's the least interesting thing, actually. The real story here is there's this sentiment that's forming, right? There's a pushback in general right now to Web3s and NFTs. The arguments are always different, right? Like the Ubisoft community said it was just another way to, for Ubisoft to milk the community, right? They had that Ubisoft posted the YouTube video and it got downvoted to hell. It was like 5% of users liked it, 95 disliked it. Gamers say it'll ruin games. Others say it's bad for the environment. Discord, the same thing, got absolutely shredded. Jack says VCs are bad. All of these pushbacks are so freaking emotional, right? The framework is, this is just, what we're seeing is these are just disruptive technologies, and there's always a pushback to it. And it doesn't really matter what the pushback is, because there's always, people are just grasping at straws here. And so like Bitcoin, but what's happening with Web3? Bitcoin was disruptive at first. Bitcoin got a lot of crap and people didn't like it. But eventually what's happening now is like, it's disruptive to Jerome Powell and Jamie Dimon, and everyone can kind of get on board with that. It's like, yeah, screw the bankers, right? It's like, everyone's like, yeah, I hate my experience with Bank of America, right? And then what happens is Web3 comes along. And now Web3 says, we're going to disrupt Web 2. But the issue is that Web 2 has a broad base of consumers that say, like for me, I'm like, wait. I actually like Web 2. And there's a lot of people who say, wait, I like Web 2. Yeah, I hate my bank. I hate the Fed. I like Web 2. And so Jack Dorsey is a Web 2 guy. And so I think there's A, consumers that actually like Web 2, but B, there are these builders like Jack Dorsey. I know he's really smart, but there are narratives that he had to learn to build a really successful Web 2 company. Centralization, efficiency, right? These are fundamental truths that he has to unwind in order to actually understand Web 3. Easier said than done.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, I think we shouldn't be surprised that we're getting all this pushback and hate. Like this is what a disruptive technology looks like. And so, you know, to me, that's just indicative that we're early. And if this were a marginal piece of technology, meaning Web 3, and what it provides, it wouldn't be getting all this criticism. So, you know, I think it's normal, it's expected, and quite frankly, it's just a little underwhelming to see someone that has that amount of impact and influence, really go off the rails. And it's a reminder for all of us. I mean, we kind of see this within crypto as well. You know, we have this maximalism camps that are very rigid and their thinking is ossified. And so, I mean, I just think that generally you always need to keep an open mind. Intellectual curiosities brought you to crypto is probably what led Jack to, have this breakthrough to develop Twitter early on, and no one believed it early on. And so, I think it's difficult, right? When you have all this success, I think you inherently think that you're an expert on everything, and it's a good reminder for all of us to always keep an open mind and maintain that level of intellectual curiosity, because otherwise, my thesis for a long time has been, these sequential waves of technology and disruption are happening much faster and they're compressing because you have information moves much faster with the internet. Capital is moving much faster with Web 3, right? You can now move capital at the speed of information. You combine the two, and it's an open source environment. And so the three combinations sort of like explosive, right? And so I think like the minute you shut yourself out and you stop learning and you stop introducing the possibility of adopting new technology, you're going to get wiped out much faster. And it's not going to be in 10 years. It's probably going to be in 5 years, and probably go less than that, right? And so, we'll see.
I'm upset with us, Santiago, for spending so much time on this. Let's move past Jack Dorsey. Number two, second narrative, DAOs are winning deals against VCs. Here's what I mean by this. In 2017 and 2018, the VCs that won the deals were the VCs with capital. The reason being, there wasn't much capital, right? There weren't that many people who were willing to invest in crypto, right? There were some VC firms, and you guys launched FeiRari, and I think it was like 2018, and like some VCs put in money, but really you just needed money to get into these deals because that's really all you needed. Then in 2019, as DeFi started it was really heart of the bear market, but like DeFi started to kind of pick up a little bit into 2019, 2020, you needed liquidity, right? So now for the first time ever, those VCs who didn't have a way to provide liquidity were not actually winning the deals. It was the VCs with who had like trading arms, right? Who could provide liquidity, make markets around the tokens. That trend is now coming to an end where everyone has access to liquidity. Everyone can provide liquidity. In 2021 and 2022, the VCs with distribution started winning deals. And that's really interesting because it's, the folks who can actually bring users and things like that. What's even more interesting than that, though, but that's that's nothing new, right? Andreessen Horowitz 10 years ago said we're going to help our portcos with marketing and sales and kind of all access to help them with kind of every different arm of the business. That's not that interesting. What's interesting is that now, so we went from capital to liquidity to help with distribution. Now DAOs DAOs are out competing VCs because it's not just helping with marketing / distribution. It's helping with community, right? Yeah. So like the cap table now that I'm seeing a lot of times, and I really want to get your take on this, is you've got a VC who leads. Oftentimes the VC actually has developer and engineering talent so that they can help them create the network. They can do tokenomics, things like that. So VC with an engineering team and like devs lead the round. Then like 1 or 2 VCs, 3 VCs with liquidity pile in, right? This is why like Jump and Alameda are winning deals because they have access to liquidity. Then you've got a lot of angels who can help with like marketing and growth and maybe if like partnerships and things like that. And then you're starting to see, yeah, that's Santiago. Shout out Santiago. And now you're seeing DAOs for the first time ever. I'm seeing them on these cap tables because they can actually give them 2,000, 5,000 users right out of the gate.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on this? Are you seeing this?
Absolutely. I think the last 10 deals I've done, and I'm quite active, all of them have had a DAO. And look, a lot of them are in gaming. And so you've had guilds that are structured as DAOs participate. Or NFT infrastructure. You have like, something like a Pleaser DAO, for instance. And yeah, like it is, I think what you're alluding to, which I would agree with, is DAOs are organizations of individuals that have capital and have talent and have resources to support other projects, right? And so it's almost like I would liken it to like a corporate VC in many ways. Like a lot of these DAOs have a specific purpose, whether they're a guild, they're a game, or they're a protocol ecosystem fund, and maybe you count that as a DAO. And so you see this in healthcare and other industries where corporate VCs are very active, and I think that trend is permeating into crypto and to Web3 and manifested as a DAO. And so you're right. I mean, I think these rounds are not necessarily getting larger, but in the decision process that I talk to a founder, he sends me a list of like all the 20 people that he's talking to, and invariably we always carve out room for DAOs. And sometimes I don't think they've been leading rounds yet. But they are among the larger check sizes, increasingly so. And so that's something that is pretty interesting, at least anecdotally from my perspective, I've seen.
Yeah, DAOs are the new institutions. This really fits into that trend. What I'm curious, what DAOs, like what are the actual DAOs that are participating? Like, is it these big DeFi DAOs that have like 5 billion? Like, I don't know what Uniswap has now, like 2, 3, 5, 10 billion in their treasury. Like, or is it the DeFi companies that really took off in 2020? Is it just the gaming guilds? Like, who are the DAOs?
It's been mostly in gaming that I've observed, specifically guilds. And I haven't seen that many DeFi DAOs really make investments. Certainly DeFi founders, but not DAOs. It's been mostly in gaming. Yeah. And
okay, so gaming guild invests in the company now. So what actually happens there? The thesis is that the gaming guild has maybe, I don't know, a couple thousand people in the guild. And so then the game that they invested in, all those, that's like free 3,000 gamers to come in.
Exactly. It's a customer acquisition strategy. It's a customer acquisition strategy. Yeah. Especially like in the games that I've
community acquisition.
Community acquisition, user acquisition. Yeah. Very efficiently. Right.
Really, really interesting. I do wonder though, almost if it gives the guilds too much power. Right, if a guild gets to be too large and like if they own almost all the users and they own like the tokens, you can quickly see a world where the guild starts manipulate. Actually, I mean, they probably wouldn't do this because of the game theory behind it, but like they could hypothetically change some of the economics of the game, perhaps.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is a topic for another discussion. We're going to have Gabby from YGG. We're going to have Felix from Salad Ventures, which is another guild. And we're going to have other, games like Kieran from Luvium and a few others come on. And I think this is something we should definitely ask these guys, like how are guilds structuring and working with games and what kind of influence they're having? Because it's a fine line, right? Sometimes it can exert a lot of influence if you're a dominant guild, like YGG, for instance, is like the largest guild right now. And so they have a considerable voting power on Axie, for instance, because, a lot of the users from Axie are coming from YGG. And so they are sort of like these, they could be activist token holders because, they could propose certain things, and it's going to be interesting how this governance landscape evolves and guilds become active in these games and influencing governance level decision making.
Definitely a trend to follow. Permission DeFi, trend number 3. So permission DeFi, I'm torn on it, and I just need your take. On one hand, it's enterprise blockchain, and on one hand, I feel like such a schmuck getting excited about this permission DeFi thing. And by the way, for context, permission DeFi is KYC AML'd decentralized apps, right? So a couple examples, like Solrise is, I think, one of the first DEXs that is a KYC DEX. Solrise launched Solrise DEX Pro. Some of the more noticeable ones that you guys would recognize, like Aave. Aave launched Aave Arc, right? It's a KYC AML whitelisted institutional offering by Aave. They just onboarded Seba, SEBA, big Swiss bank, right? And so Seba, if approved, like Seba will be able to onboard users and grant permissions for the wallets to participate in ARC protocol transactions. And the firm, because it's this permission DeFi, they can require KYC AML check on all of the ARC users. So, Compound launched Compound Treasury, right? So on one hand, I'm like, it's not really DeFi if it's this KYC AML stuff. On the other hand, I get it, right? Because the main thing to understand is that a lot of the investors have mandates that, especially traditional investors, like these banks, have mandates that they literally cannot allocate capital to non-KYC AML pools and platforms, especially DeFi platforms. So the DeFi platforms, like 1inch raised $175 million. They said they want to reach institutions, so they're going to launch this permission DeFi thing on 1inch, right? Mm-hmm. Because they need to access those pools of capital that literally cannot allocate to non-KYC AML pools. What do you make of permission DeFi? What are your thoughts here, Santiago?
I'm actually quite bullish on it because I've always felt that, in order for DeFi, like what is the ultimate goal here, right? The ultimate goal is to really disrupt finance, and for DeFi to power a lot of the financial functions. This is just a new operating standard. Banks, I think, like it increasingly. There's really not a lot of hesitation and pushback here. Like, even banks are really motivated to adopt DeFi, right? We talked about in the episode with Stani, which is why would a bank be interested in DeFi? Well, because the number one department that keeps growing is operations and compliance. And what does a transparent blockchain do? Well, it removes a lot of friction, right? And so they are able to cut costs. And so really good technologies have this function where they increase a lot of, you're either cutting costs or increasing you're providing a lot of value. DeFi is doing both, right? There are certain subset of users that don't have access to financial services. DeFi allows that. Anyone that has an internet connection can come and get access to this entire ecosystem and invest in stuff and create a savings account and all this stuff. Banks are also motivated to do that. Process like mortgages. Think about the entire mortgage operation. You've been through it, I think, recently. It is just an entire clusterfuck of things. And it's a huge, huge, huge cost driver for banks. But the problem has always been, well, when you're interacting this open permissionless environment, you kind of need to know who your counterparty is. And there is a subset of users in DeFi that really value that. And as you said, it is institutions. Now, you could push back here and say, wait a minute, DeFi is a closed system. If in order for you to enter DeFi, you need to somehow at some point provide KYC and ML, right? Think about getting ETH into DeFi. Getting funds into DeFi requires you to go through an on-ramp. That on-ramp should be doing the proper checks. So I understand that, but it's not enough for certain users, right? And so the important distinction that I want to make is this is yes, it is, it's sort of like you're still operating using the Ethereum blockchain, that is the important thing to recognize, or Solana, for instance. Like the settlement happens at the base layer, or an L2. And that relies on, obviously, the security guarantees of open permission blockchains. This is not like a Hyperledger or an L3 or Corda or all this other random stuff that over the years has been tried and shelved. You're just simply saying, I'm going to create a ring-fenced environment that anyone that comes in here, we know who they are. But you're still not trusting each other. You just know who they are. You're trusting the settlement in the blockchain. And so I don't know. I want to make that distinction very, very clear because one of the benefits here might be if you're using Aave today, the beauty of it is there's a smart contract that executes a certain logic that if your collateral is X, you can borrow Y, and if your margin, if your health ratio falls below Z, then you get liquidated by these keepers. So that is beautiful because you always understand how the system works. And compared to a bank that you don't have the transparency. Now, Aave Arc, all it's saying is, yeah, we're going to still use that function, but there's going to be a subset of players here that know each other and they're borrowing and lending against each other using all the benefits that I described earlier. And so nothing really changes from my perspective. All it really does is you just know who you're interacting with in that pool. And that's fine. Because JP Morgan might just want to interact with Wells Fargo or might just want to interact with TD Ameritrade or Fidelity or Goldman Sachs or whoever, right? As opposed to potentially some that it might be problematic, right? And so I think this is a huge improvement towards getting DeFi embedded in used by banks, because they will use it. We're not going to destroy banks as we know them. Banks will just use this as an operating standard. So I don't know if that's clear, Jason, but I think you let me know. But that's how I see it.
I think that's clear, and I see it the same way. I mean, but I want to kind of extend this out into the future. Like, so we've got this amazing episode next week coming out with Antonio, right, founder of DYDX next week. Really, really excited. Everyone should go listen to that next week when it drops. DYDX has become second largest decentralized exchange. Goal is to become the largest crypto exchange in the world. Let's say DYDX launches a permissioned options DeFi pool, I guess you could call it. Now you're basically going to have two different pools of liquidity. You're going to have a permissioned pool of liquidity and a non-permission, and like the normal non-KYC AML pool of liquidity.
Yep.
I can tell you who's going to use which ones, right? The institutions are going to use the KYC AML liquidity pool, the permissioned liquidity pool, and the non-KYC AML folks are going to be the retail people, right?
I'm not sure about that, actually.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so. We know this. Look, DeFi is really inefficient. It has some really beautiful properties that make up for lack of efficiency. Under collateralized loans, or this idea that you immediately get liquidated. Well, sometimes it's nice to get a call and have 48 hours to refill your collateral, as opposed to having an oracle fail on you and you get liquidated, like Black Friday. So there are certain, look, at the end of the day, I as a retail user will ultimately, like, we always come back to this idea of, like, people seem to have a knee-jerk reaction when we talk about KYC and AML. Here's the thing, folks. You've already KYC'd an AML at some point. So what's the whole goddamn problem? Like, this is sort of a very vocal minority that is not practical, anarchic, and not representative of the whole. Like, ultimately, Jason, if you get a lower rate on Aave Arc because you are willing to KYC in it, like, if you can get a better rate, if you can get a better product because there's more liquidity there, or you can get your mortgage on chain, would you not KYC AML?
Yeah, I would.
Exactly. At the end of the day, you care about the bottom line, which is you're saving on the rate, you're getting better terms. There is sort of, I think ultimately that's going to be the 90+% of users, retail and institutions, that just say most of the liquidity would be in permission pools, i.e. KYC, AML pools. And because of that, you're going to have better rates, more fluidity, and more options and value-added services in these permission pools. You're already KYCing AML into your exchange that you're using an on-ramp, so I don't know what the problem is. Like, I'm just going to say it like that because anyone that's critical of that, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I am hoping that the outcome of this is that this is all a Trojan horse for admitting that KYC AML is a fundamentally broken system, that it does no good. We can talk about ways you can KYC AML is probably a better discussion for another time. Like, you can do zero knowledge proofs. Okay, they're super computationally inefficient, but like, there are ways to KYC AML that doesn't feel like a colonoscopy. I'm even saying, like, what is the point of KYC AML right now? Like, if you look at, so there are these leaked FinCEN documents that came out, really interesting. They basically showed that these large banks, every single one of them, flags trillions of dollars of suspicious transactions every year, but continues to do business with the customers, right? And so it's like, if you think about what KYC AML is really doing, it's kind of just shutting out billions of people from the financial system who we deem to be potentially risky, right? So anyways, that's a conversation for another time. Permission DeFi, we're paying attention to it. I think you should too. Fourth narrative, then we'll get into the news. Crypto social media making a comeback. Here's why I'm interested in this. I am in the 2017 crypto wave. I know you're much earlier than I was. I came up hearing about all these dreams of crypto social media and even supply chain on the blockchain and corporate enterprise blockchains and decentralized Uber and like all this basically, for lack of a better word, crap, right? That never really panned out. And it's actually funny. I think the 2017 crowd sometimes misses things in crypto because we're so scarred by all of these narratives of 2017. Like I think 2017 people are actually missing gaming, are slower to get into crypto gaming than people who are either earlier or later than us because we're just so scarred by it, so scarred by all of these projects failing that popped up in 2017. And I think crypto social media is a really prime example of that. Mm-hmm. There were all these crypto social media projects like, if you remember, EOS launched Voice, I think it was. They bought the domain name from actually Michael Saylor himself for like $30 million. And there's all these projects saying like we want to decentralize Twitter, decentralize Facebook, decentralize Instagram, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Decentralized social media actually makes a lot of sense though, right? People think about like Bitcoin and crypto. Bitcoin's really on this collision course with macro. And it kind of sits at, and you're seeing it now. Like Bitcoin became really popular because the Fed started printing all this money, inflation, all that kind of stuff. Ties really well into the Bitcoin narrative. Mm-hmm. Web3 expands crypto outside of just monetary things, right? It makes it more about things in technology, which kind of ties back into that Jack Dorsey conversation. And so one thing that I'm thinking about is like every time the Fed does something, or every time there's a macro thing that is kind of out of whack, it props up Bitcoin. And you're starting to see signs for Web3 in the same way that there are signs for Bitcoin. Bitcoin sign equals Fed printing trillions of dollars. Web3 sign equals Twitter deplatforming people. Mm-hmm. You're now starting to see people like Stani, who I think is one of the brightest minds in crypto over at Aave, talking about building a decentralized Twitter. And the news I want to talk about is Polygon and 776, Alexis Ohanian's venture studio, just launched a $200 million social media Web3 initiative. So rambling question here, Santiago, but like my question for you is, how do you assess whether or not like we're ready for social, like things like crypto social media?
Look, it's a good question, right? I think in 2017, just weren't ready from an infrastructure perspective. Things needed to be built out to have and to support what is a more, computationally intensive use case like social. But I'll tell you why I think I'm excited about it. One, I think NFTs are telling you people are very excited about the idea of your wallet and the portability of that. You use your wallet and you interact and you pop into all these different services, but you are in control of your data and in control of and easily port in and out of solutions. And I think, you pair that with sort of at this intersection of there's a degrading trust in institutions, including, things like Facebook and Twitter. As you point out, I think I can't remember the last time I was on Facebook. Instagram's kind of okay. But, I think increasingly NFTs are here's what I'll say. The act of collecting an NFTs is a social sport. And that, again, is a Trojan horse to social media, right? Because you have the attention, and people are going to increasingly say, wait a minute, I'm spending all this time in Web3, using a blockchain service, collecting NFTs. I want to showcase them. So you have stuff like Gallery and Hype and a few, and, even your wallet. Some wallets like Zapper and Rainbow are displaying your NFTs. Isn't that just social media as it is? I mean, that's sort of like we're already there. You just need to turn the lights on because most people increasingly are coming to this space with an eye towards collecting, which is a social sport, with an eye towards gaming, which is social. It's interactive. And so all you need to do is, I think if you invert and look at it like that, that's why social is going to work. And I think we're due for a new type of platform where users are in control and I've thought about this increasingly and I'll say it to Jack, it's how much value in social networks come from the users, contributors. You and I tweet, we have presence. We add value to Twitter. If you're an early in Twitter and the network, this idea of a network effect, that you go on the platform, you invite your friends, the incremental user that comes into Facebook and Twitter, and because your friends are there, and that social graph and connectivity adds a lot of value to these networks.
Yeah.
The problem has been they don't provide and give out any value to contributors. And so it's sort of, that's a real paradigm shift here, which is people are now waking up to this idea that they can get tokens. They can be rewarded by being early adopters, by being contributors. And once you see that, and once you tell your friends that you're earning tokens and you're part owner in these networks, that you're an early adopter or you're a core contributor or an influencer or whatever, you're not going back to Web 2. And so, look, the last thing I'll say is, are we ready? Like, can these blockchains credibly support that? Yeah, I think it can. You have side chains, you have L2s, and you have other blockchains, more higher throughput, perhaps less secure, like Solana, that can support this.
Yeah. I think it's there's this Naval quote that he said on the Tim Ferriss episode with Chris Dixon. I feel like such a douche quoting Naval right now, but denying and pushing back against crypto is basically saying we're not going to have a collectively owned future. We're going to have a corporate owned future, and we're going to have a government owned future. And I don't know, it just reminds me of that. Like, why would you not get excited about something like we're posting every single day on Twitter. We're creating value for the network. We get nothing in return except for some silly little likes.
So I'll just say this. I just invested in this thing that I'm super excited about. In my portfolio, I don't have a lot of exposure to Africa. And these guys are just going to build the totally leapfrog. I think technology.
Can you give us some alpha here, Santiago? Can you tell us who it is?
They're coming on the pod next year. And
right.
So here's the thing, right? Places like, you look at China and how China developed finance, it totally leapfrogged brick and mortar institutions. People don't, WeChat, which is a social app, became your de facto financial institution, or Alipay, which was, e-commerce. Why? Because that's where you spend your time. That's where you want the service. So WeChat has become the everything app that does pretty much from social, but you're spending all the time chatting. And so then it just builds on top of that, a periphery of services. A place like Africa is going to leapfrog that and then go directly to Web3, because people are realizing that, hey, wait a minute, I can come in here. There's a whole set of incentives and values and services that I can get. And the same with play to earn has been explosive, especially in places like the Philippines and Vietnam and Southeast Asia. Like, Africa is primed for that. And when you combine a wallet that can do finances, that can provide working capital, that can provide loans, and provide messaging, like, it's sort of game over, right? And I think I'm really excited for that, because I've always felt that crypto developing countries are sort of the best testing ground for some of these things, and truly understand if there's underlying demand for these things, or if people just don't care about decentralization. I don't think they do. I think at the end of the day, they care about services that they're not getting. And I've always been hyper bullish, like on stuff like DeFi and gaming. I see them as one, because ultimately it just creates new labor structures, it creates new opportunities and access to financial services and others that you just don't have. And it's clear the governments are not going to build it. It's clear corporations might not have the incentive. But this is just, okay, the last point I'll say is we're talking to Antonio. Look at Uniswap. Look at these protocols. They have teams of 20 people, 50 people, maybe 100 people. And they're already surpassing centralized institutions. This is the thing. When you operate in this world of permissionless open source blockchains, code is infinitely more scalable. And like, when you execute logic, you program money, you don't require 100 people in compliance, 1,000 people in compliance, or administrative functions to check and cross and do all this nonsense and garbage. You basically are programming if-then logic with money and other stuff. And that is inherently infinitely more scalable. And it allows and makes a viable economic model to go out and say, yeah, we're going to bank these people. Because instead of you building brick and mortars across a very difficult geography like India, or in some of these places that are very remote, wait a minute, you already have Stuff like helium is providing internet graph, which was tried for a long time and now is working because you layer on top of that crypto economics, and all of a sudden it makes it interesting for people to host this device that provides connectivity to other people, and you earn tokens in return. And so Justice is another example of things that were not economically viable in Web 2, all of a sudden become economically viable in Web 3. Because if they're not economically viable, no one is acting in their best interest here. Ultimately, there is profit to be made, and there are incentives. And this is why this space is quite powerful, because it works on the basis that you don't trust anyone and that everyone's acting in their own interest. And so, these protocols are very, very profitable and scalable. And so keep an eye out for that. And I think, it is an important point that you touch on, Jason, which is for a lot of us that have been around in the space for quite a bit of time, perhaps we're the most skeptical of how big and different use cases that can actually be serviced with Web3.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get into some of the news. Couple of big news things. First one is really interesting. It didn't get as much attention as I thought it would. Uniswap delegates consider liquidity mining to kickstart Ethereum L2 adoption. Really, what's happening here is Uniswap is trying to push through a proposal to incentivize users to drive liquidity to things like Polygon, right? This drives transactions down from $20, $10, $30, $40 a transaction to 38, but who's counting? Down to like 1 penny, right? And so to me, this feels like money Legos falling into place. But it's really interesting because we're talking about, again, we had that conversation with Antonio from DYDX. Don't mean to bring it up too much, but he's actively thinking about, does it make sense to continue on Ethereum, right? Mm-hmm. Does it make sense for them?
Yeah. Ethereum L1, yeah.
Ethereum L1, yeah. And of course. And I don't know, it's just interesting to see Uniswap. For Uniswap, this comes about because there's someone in their organization who raised a flag saying, when we run these liquidity mining things and when we spend a lot of money, we're running a big campaign for Ethereum. Let's run it for what's best for our users. And they're not choosing Ethereum. They're choosing things like Polygon. So I don't know. What do you make of this?
Well, to be fair, Polygon's sort of like a side chain in Ethereum. And, I think they're moving in, interesting, it is built on top of Ethereum. But yeah, look, it's very refreshing to see. I think for a long time, I felt that Uniswap governance was sort of botched and nothing was going on. Obviously, they deployed an optimism. There's sort of an interesting relationship between optimism and the set of investors in Uniswap, largest holders. And so it's felt like a long time that the Uniswap governance is just sort of like a pony show, no pun intended. But I think, this is really encouraging. At the end of the day, Uniswap is still pound for pound the number one DeFi protocol on Ethereum, and for them to go to, I think it's Polygon, right? It is very encouraging because more users now get the benefit of using Uniswap and all its benefits on Polygon. So faster, better, cheaper.
Yeah. We'll talk more about this in our predictions episode next week, but one thing that I think will end up happening in 2022, early in 2022, I'm talking Q1, is a big DApp ends up moving off of Ethereum onto something else, like another L1. And Uniswap, in my mind, is just so associated with Ethereum in my mind. It's so Hayden and Vitalik, very good friends, just so associated with Ethereum. So it's interesting to see it develop like this.
Yeah.
All right. Next thing. Little bit of M&A going on in crypto right now. First things first, FeiRari Capital and Fei Protocol merged. What a good meme. FeiRari. Oh, so good. Ferrari. I don't know. I know we talked about this last time. I'm not sure if you did end up looking into this or if you want to save it for another conversation. But it's really interesting, this DeFi native M&A. They're combining protocols to basically operate using this one token tribe. And Rari's core product gains this dedicated stablecoin, Fei, while the Fei protocol becomes more useful in DeFi thanks to Rari's borrowing and lending pools. Really interesting. I think we'll see more of it. What do you make of this?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think this is just an early trend. I look at it as sort of vertical integration, or call it horizontal. I guess you could argue it's either or it could be both. But yeah, again, stablecoins are a necessary component of money markets. Rari has a money market, sort of siloed pools of liquidity. And so, it's going to be interesting how the community, I think there was pushback from a lot of certain community members. It's going to be interesting how that all shapes up. But yeah, it's sort of like an acqui-hire. I think the Rari team is, really impressive, young devs, and so is Joey and the rest of the, the Fei team. So, I don't have much to comment there other than, great meme, and we'll see how it evolves and how the community, takes it. But yeah, I mean, it certainly was voted in, so, the majority had to approve it.
Yep. Next interesting acquisition here is this Kraken acquisition of Staked. Kraken acquired staking platform Staked, the crypto exchange, to now offer its clients a non-custodial alternative to its existing capabilities. Staked enables investors in proof-of-stake networks to easily and securely compound their holdings. One of the really interesting reasons, I mean, this is Kraken's, I think, 5th acquisition of the year. They trade like 90 different cryptos, 90 different digital assets. They've got almost 10 million users. Really interesting because Staked is one of the highest staking pools out there. Yeah, staking as a service pools. So I don't know. What do you make of this acquisition?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, I think two points, I guess, conflicting. One is I don't have much insight, but I think the criticism here is so obviously Kraken is a big, has a lot of deposits from their users, and they're staking these tokens, whether it's Cosmos or like these proof of stake networks or Ethereum, to earn yield for the users. The problem with that is, there is a fair amount of centralization. When you look at like the largest staking contracts or organizations, if you will, Kraken's pretty high up there, and so is Coinbase and Binance. I guess the only one that's more of a decentralized native is Lido, which is I think larger than Kraken, I guess. So the question is Kraken's acquiring a lot of these staked assets that is interesting for their platform, but I do wonder exactly. There, Alex said it right. Staked is a number 3 ETH2 depositor, and Kraken's already number 2.
Kraken's 2 and 5, right?
2 and
Kraken's 2 and 5. Lido's number 1. Staked is number 3. So now Kraken's got 2, 3, and 5. And exactly. Stakefish has that 4th spot. So really coming at Lido here.
Yeah, and so I think it just I don't want to sound the alarm or anything, but it is important to monitor the concentration of these staking pools, and we want to have too much concentration. And so, ultimately I think it's good for their users. There are more services, perhaps more networks that they can support. Staked runs a whole set of infrastructure and staking as a service solutions for other networks that Kraken might not have, not just Ethereum. But, we constantly need to be monitoring the concentration of these ETH2 deposit addresses. And, just make sure that there is healthy diversity and decentralization.
Right. 3 trends to look at here. Intensifying M&A activity. According to Kraken, this acquisition was one of the largest to date ever in crypto. The amount was not actually disclosed, the record holder right now is BitGo, getting acquired by Galaxy for $1.2 billion. But first trend is intensifying M&A activity. Second is staking services are actually profitable, right? Figment has about $7.5 billion of staked assets on its platform. Staked has a similar amount, like $7 billion on the platform. Figment is seeing over $10 million of revenue a month, and the cost for the staking sector remained pretty low still. Staking services are profitable. Interesting thing to see develop. And the third thing is just like the spreading normalization of yield opportunities via governance protocols. One of the barriers to greater use of staking services has been the kind of complicated user experience, the need to open new accounts, token transfers, but the industry is growing despite that. I think Stake put out this market report. The market cap of the top 30 staking assets reached $600 billion at the end of Q3, which is up 65 for the previous quarter. And for the first time, proof of stake assets accounted for over 30% of the total market cap of the industry. So staked assets are growing. All right, jumping into the next topic here. We've got, we won't spend too much time on this, but I feel like we talk about this every time. funding is still out of control. Blockworks' own Jackie Melinek had this great story. 2021 crypto VC funding tops $30 billion. Investments have increased nearly 450% year over year. 2021 is not done yet. Figment closed speaking of staking, Figment closed a nice little round at 1.4 billion, up from its previous valuation of 500 million. And I mean, just crazy. I mean, there's so much damn capital flowing into the space. So I don't know. We don't have to spend too much time on this unless you want to.
Importantly, I think people are realizing proof of stake. Right, a year ago, proof of stake. I remember running infrastructure services, and it was dormant. But I think as Ethereum closer and closer, I mean, there's all the ETH2 deposit address, but more networks. We got to remember there's a lot of criticism about proof of stake being a viable solution. Most people are like, in the proof of work camp. And so the fact that Figment and Staked got acquired, there's been other funding for staking to the service firms. It's very active. Specifically staking firms are pretty lucrative. They spit out cash flow because they're earning a percentage of the rewards. And so as it's sort of an indirect bet and proxy for, as if you think that staking, proof of stake networks are going to continue to grow, and more rewards, you factor in the yield of 2, 3, 4, 5, 10%, whatever, varying degrees of staking rewards, they're earning a percentage of that. It's a very interesting business model. It's sort of like the highways, or just a toll operator for these networks, because running these, it's clear that people are going to delegate and stake with a competent operator, and so super interesting.
Yeah. Crazy chart for anyone watching on YouTube. Blockchain megarounds. Megaround is 100 million or more. It's up 1400% year over year. Really, I mean, that's a kind of funny way to put that in a percentage term there. But there was 1 mega round, and now there are 15 mega rounds in Q3. So, all right, let's cruise through this. Next thing, some NFT news that's interesting this week. Adidas jumped into the metaverse. Adidas' first big NFT drop raked in 23.5 million in sales. I think that the controversy here, they dropped 30,000 NFTs on Friday, brought in almost 25 million, but one buyer scooped up 300 of these NFTs, despite the company's 2 per limit customer. This is not something new. This is something that we see in DeFi all the time. This is something that we see in NFT drops all the time. People creating a whole bunch of addresses. I don't think it's that.
It could have
big
been
of an issue.
easily mitigated, by the way. I'm not super technical on it, but I looked at how it went down. It could have been somewhat mitigated with a trivial change in the code, but it's still positive. I'm not being critical here. I mean, we live and we learn, but not cool seeing that. Yeah,
I think the more interesting conversation here, I don't want to trigger you, Santiago, but I will bring it up, is these Adidas drops are pretty intimately tied in with Bored Apes. The Bored Ape NFTs flipped CryptoPunks' floor price in ETH for the first time ever.
Yeah. Well, look, it's it's okay. I've owned Bored Apes. I know the team. I think they respect. I have a ton of respect for what they're doing. It's incredible. They built a lot of community and continue to add different services and partnerships. And look, that drives value. We talk about it. This is, I can't think of a NFT project community that is adding this amount of value. And there's like Cool Cats and a few others that are building documentaries or like not documentaries, like games and and TV shows and all this stuff. It's great. I continue to think it's super positive, and I'm happy to see it. Yeah.
A little bit of regulatory stuff going on here. Terra hit back at the SEC, claiming that Do Kwon and also Terra were not properly served by the SEC, and that as non-U.S. residents, they are not under the SEC's jurisdiction. Love to see Do Kwon just fighting back here.
He's a fighter.
It's an understatement. He is definitely a fighter. And I think, we don't have to talk about this one too much. I think it's just an interesting case in that, he's going at the SEC, right? He's going on podcasts. He went on CoinDesk the other day, CoinDesk video, and he's fighting back. So we'll see what happens here.
Well, look, I think it could be pretty daunting. I think my my belief is that we need to have more dialogue with regulators, as opposed to just having this sort of like lobbying subpoenas and then back and forth and like artillery rounds. It's just sort of like, let's have open discussions, have a forum to talk about it. There is one. There is open sandbox and open invitations to do this, but it can be daunting, right? When you're left wondering, like, am I going into the lion's den here and like, exposing myself? But, I think more and more, hopefully we can develop more connectivity and dialogue with regulators, because ultimately I think the representative message that the community here has is we just want to have open dialogue and constructive dialogue to help you understand this and help you craft sensible regulation that meets new technology with new type of regulation, not old archaic regulation. Right.
And I think the conversation to be had here is like, what are the SEC standards, right? Because I think it was in 2018, June of 2018, the SEC came out and officially declared that Ether is not a security, right? And Terra is trying to build an L1 here, right, to compete with Ethereum. And so if the SEC... Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it has. And so, if the SEC comes out and comes down strongly against Terra, they're basically king-making Ethereum just because Ethereum was earlier, right? And this would be kind of the comparison is like if I don't know, the early Google, the search, I call it Google search now. The early searches.
For instance, if you said that Uber was like good and Lyft wasn't, so you had to have like a whole
or any of these, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, the point has always been sufficiently decentralized, and this is Ethereum benefited because it was early, it was first, I guess, in many ways, and to do this crowd sale approach, and we're not going to see the end of this anytime soon. Hopefully, these type of discussions in the way that they're manifesting themselves, the outcome of that is, just more clarity.
Yeah. The last piece of regulation that I want to touch on is just the Circle Bank banking executive came out and said that the banking rules on stablecoin issuers could end the industry. I thought that was pretty interesting. The proposal is that stablecoin issuers must be insured, that they must be insured banks. And he called that pretty dangerous to the industry. I don't actually think I think this is just a Circle executive trying to defend his business a little bit, but I think it's always interesting to look at like what are different chokeholds on the industry, like what are certain central points of failure. You could almost say that like going after stablecoins would be a kind of central point of failure. The industry would end up working out. It would just delay success. Another point might be actually Prime Trust, right? Prime Trust is the back end for a lot of applications in crypto. If you don't build it yourself, you usually use Prime Trust. Most of the apps that people use are built on Prime Trust these days. And so another central point of failure could be going after Prime Trust. So like these are just different central points of failure that I think are interesting to call out and for people to understand the risks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Top signal, my favorite of the week. Radioshack, our mission is to be the first protocol to bridge the gap in mainstream usage of DeFi. Get notified as soon as the Radio token is launched. Radioshack token, we buying?
I mean, I don't even know what it is. But I will say, like, how many lives does this cat have? Because, I mean, they're avoiding... If they pull this off, I will... hats off to them, because... Okay, we laugh at this. Innovated the Ty Lopez and all this stuff behind it, and it is kind of comical. It's hard not to like laugh and just be serious about it. But I'm very practical, man. If they can get more users into this space and discover crypto, so be it. Occam to razor. Don't ask how you get there. As long as it's aligned with your principles and values, and they don't do scammy stuff or outright fraud, and they do well for the users, so be it. It's another onboarding funnel.
I think the important thing to remember here is that Ty Lopez owns Radioshack.
Correct. That perhaps. Can we just put a picture of
Ty Lopez acquired Radioshack.
Correct. Quite the pivot, I will say. This might be a HBS case study for all us folks that never want to go to business school, but this might be a good case study for HBS Port of Five Forces.
For those who don't remember Ty Lopez. Ty Lopez for a couple months took over all of YouTube with the "Here in My Garage" ads.
Here in my new Lamborghini.
Oh man. All right. I feel like we should move past this one. All right. Next thing that's more interesting than Ty Lopez is Muneeb Ali, one of my favorite people in all of Twitter.
Is he really?
In all of Muneeb. I love Muneeb.
Oh, interesting.
I really love Muneeb. Muneeb was the first guest ever on this show, actually, when we launched it. Muneeb is a very amazing human being. Muneeb is building stacks on basically smart contracts for Bitcoin. He's been kind of coming at the Bitcoin Maxi community recently. And he had this great tweet the other day, actually yesterday. Bitcoin Maxi paradoxes, 3 of them. Love decentralization, yet you use centralized exchanges. For example, there's no DEX for BTC. You love free markets, yet you hate venture capitalists, who are inherently free market actors. You love open source, yet you hate an entire revolution of new open source apps. And he continues on in the comments. You love freedom to do what you want, but don't work on non-Bitcoin things. You love freedom of speech, but you censor devs from Bitcoin podcasts. You love Bitcoin as best money, but only hold as passive asset. You love truth seeking, but create thought bubbles to live in. And it continues on. I give it 1 year before Muneeb moves over to something like Ethereum. I give it 1 year here. Why are you hanging on to Bitcoin, buddy? I love you, Muneeb. Why are you hanging on to Bitcoin?
No, look at me with Taproot and like Sovereign. Like I think a lot of I'm not dismissive of Bitcoin building some of these things. I had a really interesting discussion with Muneeb on public on Twitter, and it was exactly sort of this. It was like 6 months ago. I said, Muneeb, like I appreciate some innovation in the Bitcoin community. Like I'm not dismissive of that. The problem is, he's like, well, we could build this. I said, yeah, potentially, but why hasn't it been built? So we're like, it's sort of, and I think like this. I think it's refreshing to see this open dialogue from someone that has been and well respected, I think, in the Bitcoin community. Well, and it's increasingly rare to find this type of thinking in the Bitcoin camp. And so, I think he's just calling out some truth, and clearly had a lot of reaction to that. But yeah, in the same way that perhaps some people are being frustrated, like Antonio mentioned this, like he was frustrated at the pace of Ethereum scaling. Some people have just been frustrated at the Bitcoin community, and again, I don't want to come across as someone that doesn't like Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin I have a lot of respect for it. I think it serves a very clear focus and purpose. And that might be okay, and you just stop there. But the only thing that I've always have failed, it's just very difficult for me to understand, is I think that most people come to crypto because they had the intellectual curiosity to explore something new, because were either burned by an experience that they had, or were frustrated with something, or just stumbled upon it. And at what point do you believe that by shutting yourself out and not entertaining different pieces of technology that are complementary, not competitive, I think, not zero sum to this space? Like Ethereum is complementary to Bitcoin. That's a thought that I've always had. I don't think it's zero sum. Can Ethereum be a store of value? Yes. Does that detract from Bitcoin's value proposition? Maybe. But I don't think it obliviates the need for Bitcoin. And so, I've always found it very difficult and perplexing to understand folks like Jack, and we tie out this episode yet again with Jack, because I don't understand maximalism. It is, and I will never understand it. I understand people have bags and want to protect their interests, but do you really think like that it's like, that this world exists out there. You might as well probabilistically say, well, I probably should learn about this, pay attention to it, not dismiss it. Because the minute you dismiss something, you're going to get blown out. As an investor, you're going to get blown out. The minute you shut yourself out to new pieces of technology, especially how early we are, everything that we touched on in this episode suggests and continues to suggest that we are so goddamn early. And for you to shut yourself out, we still might be in the AOL pets.com phase of this industry. Heck, maybe even earlier. And I'm not prepared to come out saying that Ethereum is the winner or any other piece of technology yet. I think we're so early, and the best we can do as investors, just community members, is align ourselves with communities and pieces of technology that we think, are providing real value and utility to meet a demand out there, or will build different really cool pieces of technology that will enable new kinds of applications or new kinds of business models that were impossible before. Whatever you want to call that, Ethereum, Solana, Terra, blockchain XYZ, I don't care. It's going to come. You just need to keep your eyes out open and your mind open as well and be flexible.
Yeah. Bitcoiners are the new gold bugs. It's just a fact. It's like, yeah, I mean, it just astonishes me. And I think that in 2022, like the Bitcoiners have to make a choice. Like, are you just going to continue going down this rabbit hole, shut out the entire rest of the industry and continue to look like fools? Or are you going to just accept what's happening? Lean in. Let us help you. Let us lean into the fact that Bitcoin is the store of value assets. It's amazing. Bitcoin's the king, baby. Lean into it. Anyways.
Yeah.
NLW had this really interesting tweet. Pull it up here. I think land being scarce might be the wrong model for the metaverse. Kind of flips a lot of stuff on its head, right? Because you've got a lot of this. You're saying that the reason that this metaverse stuff is interesting is because it's this. You've got this scarce asset. The reason I want to ask you about it, of course, I found you already had a tweet on this. Should land in the metaverse be scarce? And you posted a little poll to your audience. 1,624 votes later, 46% of people said no. 38% of people said yes. Right, so 8% more people said no. Land should not be scarce. Where did you fall down on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I then tweeted after that, and candidly before.
I can't find every tweet, Santiago.
I know.
We need like a researcher or something.
I do think that again, NFTs and land, we come from this Bitcoin centric mentality that scarcity drives value, but I think it's utility and abundance that drives value. I think it's utility that drives value, not scarcity in stuff like gaming and land. Ultimately what you don't want is, I think most people come to realize, if you have scarcity in the metaverse, then it becomes super expensive. And then users are going to go elsewhere. New users are going to go elsewhere. And so right now it's a very small subset of users. And so you have to think about, what does the game look like in 2, 3, 5, 10 years? And you, Jason, if you come into this game in 3 years and it's so expensive to buy an Axie or to buy whatever, Alluvial or what have you, then it's not fun. This is common. If you look at why games don't work, is because they are very hard to level up. They're very hard to get initiated. And okay, there are people that can spend money and do that, but it's not representative. And so I tweeted, again, just around the discussion on land. I think most projects are, land is going to be really interesting in the metaverse. Probably crazier than most people think. There's going to be REITs, there's going to be derivatives that you can get exposure to different pieces of metaverse land and indirectly be a really good bet on how the metaverse evolves. But most people are not thinking about how to develop that land. I was just thinking, a lot of the land in Decentraland is just sort of like barren. Decentral Games is doing some interesting. I think they built a casino and all this stuff, but again, you need to focus on utility. If most of the land's empty, okay, yeah, sure, fine, you have a plot of land next to Snoop Dogg. And what are you going to build? And how cohesive is this metaverse going to be? So, I think most teams will be well served. My tweet was, we need to study urban development in the real world to understand learnings of how we should think about the metaverse. Should there be zoning? There should be residential pieces. There should be commercial pieces of parcels of land. Otherwise, it's just there's a mumbo jumbo, and so how are things going to work? Billboards and taxation. There's this idea that people hoarding, and so there's interesting economic theories around people shouldn't hoard, right? Because cities like New York and Singapore and Hong Kong, are super expensive, and London is super expensive, and they're super concentrated with a set of people that are sniping these pieces of land and not doing anything with them. And so ultimately I think that the North Star is utility, and we should focus on, and for that reason I think land should probably not be scarce in the metaverse, and you should just focus on building a lot of utility. And I think that to me reads like it should be probably abundant to support billions and billions of users.
I have very strong conviction on what I think will happen, which is, I think I agree with you if I understand your thesis. The metaverse land will not be scarce. There will be an unlimited amount of land in the metaverse. Unlimited amount of land. In the same way that there's an unlimited amount of land actually in the world, right? It's just that there really is. There's an unlimited amount of land in the world. There's so much of this world that we haven't put houses on, right? Drive through the U.S. I used to drive every year from to and from college, right? From San Francisco to Atlanta. back and forth, did it like 10 different times, go through the middle of the U.S., unlimited amount of land in the middle of the U.S. I can assure you, nobody wants to live there though, because people want to live in the cities because of proximity. So what the metaverse is going to look like, there's an unlimited amount of land. Most people don't care about most of that land though. If I don't know, Obama or Novogratz or Snoop Dogg goes and puts a house down, right. That land around it becomes much more valuable, and that's where the valuable land is going to be.
I agree with you that the ultimately we want to be around people, right? We're social beings, and that is not going to not be true in the metaverse. The problem though is, or the thing I'll just leave you with is, how does that manifest itself in a world where you can teleport yourself to any piece of land super quickly in seconds? The speed of light, you can go anywhere. And so yeah, you could be living in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas, and in a click of a button, you go to New York.
Yeah, but nobody can see your house if you live in the middle of Arkansas, right?
Correct,
it's about showing
your
off,
point's
right?
well
It's about
taken,
walking down the street and saying, "Oh my God, there's Snoop Dogg's house, and I live next to Snoop Dogg."
Yeah. No, look. So I think like we're both saying the exact same thing. Land is probably going to be abundant and infinite, but of course there will be high density places that people congregate in and have activities. And again, we should, insofar as there's utility in the main square, Decentraland or Illuvium or whatever, then that's where you probably want to have a piece of land, right? Because
and by the way, this is going to look very similar to what's happened with like everyone launching their own Substack, is where you have a bunch of different people. Instead of like following 5 different media companies, you follow 300 different media companies, and the media companies are really just mostly individuals, right? Maybe who write like on their own Substack.
Or you mean similar subscribe to like podcasts like Empire,
Yeah, shout out, subscribe right now. Pause it, subscribe.
I love how spammy like some of these YouTube videos are like smash the like button right now.
Smash the like.
Like,
smash the like,
please.
Baby. We need
Let's
like a big pop-up to show up on the YouTube.
Huge red pop right now saying like smash the like button right now. Subscribe,
right,
please.
You can go unsubscribe.
No,
Santiago,
gents, we're not desperate. Hopefully, at minimum, people tell me, it's like, oh, listen to your podcast. Like, oh, great. Did I put you to sleep? It's like, no, okay, great. Mission accomplished.
Yeah, good. Last note on the scarce land is what's going to happen is instead of 5 big cities, like instead of New York, Chicago, San Francisco, LA, Atlanta, you're going to have thousands of cities, and it's celebrities will come in, right? Like Jake Paul is going to pop up his house in the middle of Arkansas, and all of his fans are going to come build cities around it. Unlike just going to like New York, right? And so like Snoop Dogg's going to put his thing down. Snoop Dogg fans are going to go there, but then someone that like they like more than Snoop Dogg, right? Maybe like I'm a huge Usher fan. I don't know why Usher came to mind. And Usher's going to pop his house down in like the middle of the metaverse, and Usher fans are going to come over. So,
I agree.
All right, enough about scarce land. The last thing I want to call out here is just a little bit of alpha. I really liked this guy Darren. He's got this great Telegram group, actually, the Daily Ape, where he aggregates a lot of info at the end of every day.
Shout out to the Daily Ape. Fantastic piece of news. This is one of the few things that I check religiously every day. Yeah,
me too, actually. Me too. Love the Daily Ape. Shout out, Darren. Pretty insane how much some of the DeFi 1.0 tokens are down. Oh my God. Cream down 92%. You've got Sushi is down 77%, right? Aave down 73%. 1inch down 70%. This is alpha, baby.
Should I lick my wounds now, or what's the point of this, Jason?
The point of this is, you know what people are underestimating right now is DeFi 1.0. There's so much attention pulled into Metaverse, gaming, NFTs. You know what I'm still excited about? Call me a lame old school guy here. I'm excited about DeFi 1.0. I know people are looking at DeFi 2.0, gaming. DeFi 1.0, man. That is...
I was thinking exactly about this going to bed last night, and I tweeted. So I always tweet like, why am I there at the gym? Or
Story
like
of Santiago, yeah.
And I said, I was just thinking about this, which is there's no point in trying to classify it, crypto market as bull or bear. You know what I mean? Like everyone's like talking, are we in a bull market? Are we in a bear market? I'm like, there are pockets of crypto that are in bullish territory, and there are others that are in distress levels. And I said, focus on the underlying quality of assets, develop a view on price or on the team, or the value of that, and say great assets. So this idea, it's like Howard Marks from Oak Creek, great, one of the best investors, and he said something that really stuck with me. Is great assets can make for terrible investments because they're priced to perfection. The same way that a terrible asset can make for a fantastic investment because it's left for dead and you pick it up at pennies on the dollar. And so to me, it's always like crypto's always been this market, interestingly, which narratives get pushed to extremes. We talk about narratives all the time in this episode. And you always kind of get a sense of like, you never want to be catching the tail end of that, right? Whether it's NFTs right now, they're all the buzz, all the rage, you know. Whereas, you know, I think you instead want to be focusing on the things that are quietly building and working in the background and not getting much love. And I'll tell you, in my estimation, things like DeFi, punks maybe right now, are not getting any love. And none of this is financial advice, but I will say it's just that is, I think, if I were to distill the number one thing, for instance, when I talk to people, it's like, you know, you go to a committee, for instance, and you talk about or you talk to your parents or you talk to people about stuff, and they're like so excited and get a lot of conviction on a particular investment opportunity. And you're like, yeah, fine, like I don't disagree with you, but what do you know that the rest of the market doesn't know? And what do you know that is not already priced in? And I think ultimately people just make this mistake that they obsess and they fall in love with stuff. I'm like, listen, I don't disagree with you. Apple's a great company. Tesla, great. Okay, you like the cars. I don't, but fine. Great company. But like, what is the valuation? What does the price today reflect? And the expectation, because everything is a discounted, discount cash or whatever, discount to whatever you feel is going to happen in the future. And look, I think most assets are there. A lot of them can be great, but they're just priced to perfection. And so it leaves this idea of margin of safety, which is, something that's super interesting and should be properly understood. And you always need to wonder what's being priced in here, because they're all, fine. I'm not disagreeing with you. Some of these projects, fantastic, super exciting, super sexy, whatever. But it leaves practically zero margin of error. And I never want to be holding that, because I think invariably there always are hiccups. There always are issues. And so I want to be buying stuff that most people like. Maybe it's DeFi right now, that most people are like, oh, this shit's never going to work. It's done. We don't care about it. It's like, fine. Yeah, okay. I'll bet against that all day long.
I agree. Let's get into the best part of the episode. TV show for you. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas if you celebrate it. I've got a TV show for you for the holidays. For all mankind. You will love it. I think you and me, both big history nerds. For All Mankind basically explores the possibilities that might exist if the global space race from the 60s had actually continued, and where humanity would be if the space race had actually continued, right? If there was this big communist threat still, and it didn't actually end, but like if we were still fighting the commies, and you had the cosmonauts and the astronauts, and we were racing to space, and then we get to space, we land on the moon, and what actually happened. So For All Mankind, phenomenal show.
Where can someone find it?
It is on Apple TV.
Okay, great. Very good. We'll definitely link it in the show. This is great, man. I was actually looking for, the bane of my existence is like in the spare moments that I was like, oh, I'm just going to watch something. It's sort of this rabbit hole, right, that everyone gets. It's like you end up scrolling through Netflix, and then you switch to Amazon or Apple TV, and then you're like, all right, I just spent 20 minutes. I'm just going to like go to bed now. Or as always, you just watch Harry Potter or Star Wars or James Bond.
You love
Those
your
three.
Harry Potter. You love your Harry
most
Potter.
importantly, Harry Potter. Most importantly, Harry Potter. And this is the time. I will say, I will watch yours, Jason. But I will say, if you don't like this, the best alternative and the guarantee, especially this time of year, is watch Harry Potter. Always.
Oh, it's
always
Harry Potter
forever.
Season, for sure.
Harry Potter season, always.
Yeah. All right, guys, if you guys made it to the end of the episode, first things first, go buy a ticket to Permissionless. Santiago and I are going to be hanging out in Palm Beach. What's not to like about Palm Beach? May 17th through 19th. Go to the Blockworks website. You'll see it there. Second thing, smash the subscribe. Santiago's going to kick me off this show if I say that again, but go hit that subscribe. No, I'm kidding. But actually, we have some really good episodes coming up. We've got Antonio Juliano, or Giuliano, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, from DYDX. We have Kyle and Tushar from Multicoin after that. We've got Gabby from YGG. Santiago, I haven't told you yet, but just got confirmations from Rob Leschner over at Compound. Also, Arthur from Defiance Capital. Also, Arthur from Amy Wu from Lightspeed. Also, Meltem coming on the show. So we've got some amazing episodes.
Boom. Nice.
You should subscribe to the show.
Well, my friend, this has been great. I'm very happy to come on as a co-host. It's been a true pleasure. I can't wait for more episodes next year. I think we got a stacked lineup. Happy holidays. to you, to everyone listening, and hopefully you enjoy some quality time with friends, with family, reflect on the year. I know what you'll be doing right before New Year's. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that ritual next time. And yeah, it's been a great year. Thank you for everyone. We will be working through the holidays, to be fair, Jason, because we don't have anything better to do, but we'll be interviewing, and we will have more weekly roundups in case you're tired of the turkey, tired of friends and family or fireplaces. You can always tune in to our podcast, and we'll be here.
Exactly. All right, everyone. Thanks for a great year. We will see you soon. Thanks for listening.
All right, my friend. Have a good one. Take care.